What marks the beginning of life? What are your guesses? When does life begin? This could turn into a giant political discussion. This is not a political discussion. We're talking about breathing, okay? The first inhale, from our standpoint, now, better question. When does a neurodevelopmental sequence begin? That's a safe topic. That's not going to get any kind of political stuff. When does a neurodevelopmental sequence begin? The first inhale, right? The first breath. Because before that, we're not in any postures. We're stuck in a flexed position, but we're not having to display any patterns to create stability. Everything is provided for. So obviously, the first inhale marks the beginning of the neurodevelopmental sequence. But what comes before that first inhale? Because the answer that what marks the beginning of the neurodevelopmental sequence isn't the first inhale. Something happens before that. Any guesses? Nature's very brutal. It's not that brutal. You have to be strong enough to be born. That'd be a whole nother level. The pause. Remember the breathing, the breathing cycle? We inhale, we hold, we exhale, we pause. Before we can take that first inhale, we're stuck in a pause. We're born. So when we enter this world, we're born in the pause. We go from the womb to this world on a pause. Are the lungs having to function in the womb? Do the lungs function in the womb? No, they don't. In utero, all of our oxygen comes from the umbilical cord. The lungs aren't doing anything. They're there. They're fully developed. But they're not providing oxygen. They can't provide oxygen. They're collapsed and they're full of fluid. Makes it hard to breathe when they're collapsed and full of fluid. There's the heart, the left side of the heart, the right side of the heart. The heart only functions, the right side of the heart is the dominant side of the heart in utero. And why that happens is there's this thing called the foramen ovale. It's a little passage that basically goes between the left side of the heart and the right side of the heart. So basically, in utero, the left side of the heart, blood passes through that, goes right into the right side of the heart. And the right side of the heart is what controls the entire flow of blood. Because the lungs aren't functioning. Can deoxygenated blood go to the lungs, pick up oxygen, and come back to the heart in that situation? They could. It's a wasted trip. There's no oxygen to get. So we bypass the lungs. When we're born, there's no blood flow. When we're born, the pathway of blood flow from the heart doesn't go through to the lungs to pick up oxygen because there's no need. We don't get oxygen from the lungs. So the foramen ovale allows us to bypass that. So our lungs aren't functioning. Our circulatory system doesn't even have blood flow that goes to the lungs to pick up oxygen because that's a waste. We bypass it. Everything is set up for the lungs to not even be lungs in utero. And then we're born. And even though Mother Nature's, not so barbaric that it requires, it's not like there's hold on, you don't pass go, you have to do 10 push-ups before you get out of the womb. We're not quite to that level. It does require us immediately to go from a situation where the lungs aren't functioning, the heart's not functioning the way a mature heart functions, to where it just got real. And now you have to take that first breath. And now we have to completely reroute our entire blood flow, which all happens in the span of about 10 seconds. And that's that pause. So when we're born, our first experience into the world is with a pause. And during that pause, a lot of things happen. The lungs immediately transition to being able to be filled with air. And one of the things that happens is the fluid that's in the lungs, the components of the lungs that actually secrete fluid to make the inside of the lungs moist, they actually absorb some of that amniotic fluid. And then there's a little suction that the doctor provides and it clears the rest of that. Once that happens, the lungs fill. They're not full of air yet because we haven't taken that first inhale. The lungs empty of that fluid. They're ready to be filled with air, but we still haven't taken that first breath. And that's where there's that initial pause. And then all of a sudden that first inhale happens, and it's a very rapid inhale. It's literally the first breath of life, and then the crying starts and doesn't stop for 27 years, maybe longer. So once after that first breath, so the important part is we enter the world in a breath pause. We haven't inhaled, we haven't ever exhaled, we haven't done any. We're born in that pause, and that becomes very important in just a little bit. Once we've taken that first breath, the lungs are filled with oxygen, so we take in the oxygen. Once that happens, the pressure within the lungs is lowered. That diverts blood flow. Now the blood has to go and be routed through the left side of the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen, to come back to the heart, to be pumped to the rest of the body. It happens because we take that inhale, it changes the pressure differential. Slowly, that brain volley over the next few days begins to close up. If it doesn't, it leads to problems. But normally that should close up in the first few days of life. And then the lungs are completely responsible for providing oxygen from that point forward. But we enter the world without the lungs doing anything. And it's during that pause where our entire cardiovascular system changes. We don't have a cardiovascular system before the pause. But after the pause, we do. And it's in that pause it's in that pause before that first breath that allows that transition to take place. So that when we take in that first breath, it allows that cardiovascular system to start to function.